My name is Alo Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome to another Healthy Game. All righty, folks. Let's go ahead and begin. So welcome to the Healthy Gamer webinar, day 2. Just make sure we're on here. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So my name is Dr. Alo Kanoja. Welcome to the Healthy Gamer webinar, day 2. So we decided to do this webinar because we, I know a bunch of people are kind of stuck at home with COVID, and so we thought it would be a good opportunity to offer a different kind of content. And what we're hoping to do is offer more comprehensive teaching about various concepts. So welcome to day 2. I'm excited. I'm glad that all of you guys are here. Just a little bit about the structure of the webinar. So we're going to start with 10 minutes of yoga. And based on yesterday's feedback, thank you very much to everyone who filled it out. I'm going to start by actually demonstrating one round, and we're going to go slower, and we're going to do 3 rounds today. So actually yoga may take a little bit longer than 10 minutes. The second thing, so the topic for the day, so we do yoga for about 10 minutes, then we cover a topic for somewhere between 30 and 50 minutes. And the topic today is going to be anxiety. So I'm going to explain kind of my take on anxiety. And really not so much, we're going to go into some detail, but I think a big part of the reason that I'd like to talk about anxiety today is to teach some basic principles about how the mind works. And as we better understand, like, what are the rules of the mind, then I think our ability to control ourselves sort of improves over time. And so we're going to talk a little bit about anxiety today. And then we'll have time for Q&A. And I think another piece of feedback about yesterday's webinar was that people felt like the Q&A was a little bit disorganized. I completely agree. And so they're hoping for a little bit more structure and maybe even a little bit more time for Q&A. So I'm not quite sure exactly how we're going to manage that, but we're going to do our best. So we'll have a little bit more time for Q&A. And then we'll end with about 10 minutes of meditation. So we're going to start with yoga. So I encourage everyone to get up and do yoga with me. So the purpose of doing the webinar at the same time every day and starting it with yoga is so that you guys can start it with yoga. I think it's a great way to start your day. It's a great way to, it's a great way to start your day. It's a great way to sort of physically get up and moving a little bit. And we can talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so let me just make sure we have this. There we go. Okay, so hopefully that's just a little bit more. Okay, so let's do it. So a reminder that I'm going to demonstrate one round of Surya Namaskar, and then I'll try to do. Let me actually just move this back a little bit. So, Surya Namaskar is the Sanskrit phrase that means sun salutation. So this is a set of yoga practices that's designed to do first thing in the morning, and it kind of prepares your body and your mind for the day. So the first step of Surya Namaskar is I'm gonna stand with my feet close together, kind of at attention, and then arms kind of relaxed in a namaste position. And then the first step is arms up. So biceps are going to be near the ears. So I'm going to try to give you guys a couple of like physical landmarks that if you try to do, the posture is going to be a little bit easier to achieve. And then second one is step down or go down and touch your toes. Remember, the goal here is not to touch your toes. We don't want to bend our knees. It's really to just bend your back and let gravity do the work for you. So go ahead and lean down. You guys can just watch this round, right? Third round, I'm going to put my hands, the palms of my hands right next to my feet. So they're forming kind of a little bit of a line. So show it to you guys this way. That sort of makes sense. And then what I'm going to do is put one leg back. And so once again, hand, foot, hand, leg back here. And then what you can really notice about this pose, you can look up, or you're supposed to look up, is that you can kind of like lean into it. And you'll feel like a different stretch. You can kind of come back out, lean into it, come back out. And this knee should kind of be right next to your shoulder. So I'll kind of demonstrate maybe on this side. Okay. And then this leg back. And now we're going to kind of be in push-up position. So you want to be kind of straight. And then down. And for this position, you want toes, knees, chest, so your butt is slightly elevated, and then forehead. And then we push up. So hips go into the ground, back is bent. Shoulders are not like this. Shoulders are rolled out, elbows are bent. That's completely fine. As you get better, you'll be able to push up more, but we can stay low. It's not a big deal. Look up. And I want you guys to notice when you do yoga, even as you move a subtle part of your body, like your neck, you'll notice different things in other parts of your body. And then we go to Parvatasana or mountain pose. Once again, ears by the biceps. Put your heels into the ground. Other leg forward. Look up again. And then back to head down. You'll notice that even between the first round and the second round, your flexibility is going to be far more increased. And that's the purpose of yoga. And then we go up again. And then back to the center. Okay? So now you guys do it with me. We're going to do 3 rounds. We're going to go slow. Maybe this yoga is going to take a little bit longer, actually. It's okay. So start with your feet apart. Close your eyes. Go ahead and just feel your body for a moment. And now put your feet together. Feel the instability. Open your eyes. And then close them again. You can use this just slight opening and closing of the eyes, like open for a few seconds. Feel the stability return. Close your eyes. Feel the instability. So even that can kind of anchor you in the present. It's going to be an important skill we'll talk about later. Namaste position. Deep breath in and out. And now begin. So raise your arms up slowly. Biceps to ears. Go ahead and stretch your arms up a little bit. Good. Feel that expansion in your back. And now the next step will be we're going to touch our toes. Or bend down to touch your toes. So go ahead and do that. Let gravity do the work for you. Let yourself hang, let your head hang. Hold that for about 10 seconds. Just hang. You don't have to be very low. You can do this. You can do this. Whatever your back feels like. Doesn't matter. And now, palms by your feet. Right leg back. And look up. Just hold that for a second. Try to get into the position. Breathe. Notice as your body sends you signals. It's going to be talking to you. And then put your other leg back. Push-up position. Look up. If you feel tired, that's okay. If your muscles are quaky, that's okay. You can put your knees down, toes down, chest down, forehead. And we're going to go ahead and just hang out here for a second, okay? Palms touching the ground, toes touching the ground. That took 30 minutes. Okay, so I've got a question for you guys, okay? Let's do a poll. So we're going to do a poll. What do you guys want to talk about today? Yoga or anxiety? We can just talk about yoga, actually, if you guys want. Oh. All right, so let me know. So we can just talk about what yoga is, or we can go back to anxiety and how yoga works. Oh man, I love this. Okay, so it sounds like we're sticking with anxiety. No. Within like 5 seconds, I saw a huge spike for anxiety. So we'll do that. That's okay. We'll stick with anxiety, okay? It's all the same anyway. Okay, thank you guys very much. I found that very helpful. Okay. So, oh, interesting. Okay. So someone suggested that I use a different note-taking app, which I'm happy to, but I just realized that I can't screen capture on this app, or I don't know how to. So we're actually going to go back to just regular notes, okay? Oh. Okay. All right, so let's talk about anxiety. Oh my God, my OCD is killing me. Okay. So let's go ahead and screen share. So thank you guys very much. And let's go ahead and go back to this. Channel your inner boomer. Okay. So then what we're going to do is this. So let's talk about anxiety. Are you guys seeing this okay? Let me just make sure. Okay. So, question number 1. What is anxiety? Right? Let's start with basics. Oh, interesting. Looks like I can't cast. Maybe it's because it's using reflector. Okay, so what is anxiety? So the first thing is let's just think a little bit about what our experience of anxiety is. So when I'm anxious about something, I'm worrying, right? So we use this word worry. And so what is worry? Worry is thinking of consequences, right? We're usually worried about stuff. We're worried about, oh, what are people going to think of me? What's going to happen at work today? What is my boyfriend or girlfriend going to think? how do I look? Are people going to think I'm stupid? So there are all kinds of thoughts, but they're basically thinking about consequences, usually of your actions. Like if I go to, if I go out with friends and I open my mouth, is everyone going to think I'm dumb? If I answer a question and I get it wrong in class, is everyone going to think I'm done? And so that's really what worry is. So it's thinking about consequences. And so the next question is, if we look at consequences, this is going to sound like a weird question. When do consequences happen? And the answer is in the future. So the first thing to understand about anxiety is our mind's ability to predict problems in the future. Okay? So, how do I, okay. So if we think about this, so like, let's say here's our mind, right? Here's our brain, whatever. It's a bad looking brain. 5 head. So we'll give this person Dr. K's artwork, okay? So this is who we are, and this is your anxious mind, right? Because the anxious mind is kind of like always, it's gigantic, it feels heavy. And then since we're anxious, we're gonna give you a frowny face, all right? That's a mustache, and then that's your face, okay? All right, so this is our brain, right? And what we're gonna, so if we think about it, like our brain is kind of thinking about the future, right? What if? What if? What if? So this is anxiety. Does that make sense? So fundamentally, this is our mind's ability to like look into the future. So what that means is that, if we think about it, like how does anxiety work? It is essentially our mind's predictive capability. So anxiety is actually a normal function of the mind, which is our predictive, kind of like danger, like it's predictive and like danger oriented. Like that's what our mind has, this capability that sort of looks into the future. And then let's see if we can, how do I, okay, hold on. Let's do this, there we go. Okay, so our mind has this capability to look into the future and predict problems. And if we didn't have this capability, like we wouldn't be alive. So this is an evolutionary capability. So evolution helps us predict problems, okay? And so when our problem predicting capability gets out of our control, this is anxiety. So I want you guys to think about this for a second, okay? So we have our head, I'm just gonna make a circle, and then it has all these functions, right? So danger prediction, kind of reflecting on the past, fantasy, right? And that too is sort of future oriented. Has things like imagination. These are all the functions of the mind. Like there are more, but these are kind of what we'll talk about. So the interesting thing is that so generally speaking, what we want to do is we want to be in control of these functions of our mind. So, I want to think about, okay, if I'm going to, let's say COVID, the COVID quarantine is like going on in many places. So we want our mind to be able to look into the future and anticipate problems, right? So anticipate problems. And this is vital because like, unless we know how to prepare for the future, like we're going to get screwed. So our mind kind of like, I say, okay, so COVID is going on. What do I need to do? Like, how do I prepare? So that's like a very healthy part of our mind. What anxiety is when this function of our mind actually like we lose control of it. So we don't get to decide when it operates. That's what anxiety is. So anxiety is problem anticipation out of control. right? And if you think about it, that's what it really is. Like if I have social anxiety, I'm gonna create all these kinds of potential problems for my social interaction. If I'm worried about my health, then I'm like, I have a pain in my chest, and then my mind automatically goes to all these different thoughts about, oh, maybe I have a heart attack, maybe I have cancer, maybe I have this, maybe I have that. And it's like problem anticipation, but just blown out of proportion. So this kind of comes back to, and I'm going to just steer away from my earlier drawing. So this is the mind. So anxiety is future focused. Okay. So now, what does this mean? So like, let's just think about this. Like, can you have anxiety about the past, or is all anxiety focused in the future? Can you have any anxiety in the present? And some people will say, oh, you can't have anxiety in the past. Like I'm super anxious and I think about last night. Like I woke up this morning and I'm feeling super anxious because last night I went out with some friends and then I made a joke and then like 6 people laughed, but then it was sort of like directed at the 7th person, because this is how anxiety works, right? It's super complicated. And then you kind of notice that that 7th person laughed, maybe they were offended. So isn't that thinking in the past? The answer is actually no, because what is anxiety really doing? It's thinking about a past event and it's thinking about the consequences in the future, right? Even when you think about anxiety, like if you have anxiety about past events, if you really pause and study yourself, what you're really worried about is the future impact of your actions in the past. So anxiety is always, future focused. So this is like piece of homework number 1, right? I encourage you to examine this point. So between now and tomorrow, I want you to think about every single anxious thought, or like whenever you have an anxious thought and you can remember it, look at yourself and try to figure out, okay, am I worried about something in the present, the past, or the future? And see if this is my assertion. You guys tell me if that's true or if that's false, okay? So anxiety is essentially our future like problem predicting capability. So can it exist in the past or can it exist in the present? Second thing that I want to note is that since anxiety is essentially a normal function gone wild, what is that, what are some of the implications of that? So the first is that the higher the IQ, the worse the anxiety. So just think about this for a second, okay? So if you have a function that predicts problems, the greater your analytical capability, the stronger your analytical capability, the greater chance there is that it's going to be able to predict more problems. And what this means is that if people try to fight against your anxiety, and by people, we're including yourself, the smarter you are, the stronger it is. So when you try, so a lot of times the response is reassurance. And what do I mean by that? People tell you, you say, oh, everyone thinks I'm a dumbass. And then someone comes to you and says, oh, no, man, like we all like you. We think you're a fantastic person. And the smarter you are, like the stronger you are at knocking that away, right? You say, no, dude, like you really don't understand. And they make all these different arguments to try to convince you that you don't have anything to worry about, that people like you. And then your anxiety is like, nah, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. Because this is what I want you guys to understand, is that this is actually a normal function of your mind. So if your mind is strong, if you're high level, then your stats are going to be high. And like if anxiety takes control of you, then like its stats are going to be high. I want you guys to think about, in games, like there are mind control mechanics, right? And like you want to mind control the strongest enemy you can, because then you're going to get the strongest ally. And anxiety is sort of like mind controlling it's taking control of your problem anticipation, your ability to predict problems, and it's kind of like using it against you. So the first thing to understand is that anxiety is not necessarily an illness. I mean, I think it certainly is an illness, but it's not an illness in the way that an infection like COVID is an illness, right? It's not something that happens to you. It's actually a part of you that is malfunctioning. It's not external. So next thing to kind of think a little bit about is that most things in our brain are learned. And I want you guys to appreciate for a second that anxiety is usually learned, okay? And what I mean by that is that, if you're worried about social anxiety, there's usually a reason you're worried about that as opposed to healthcare anxiety or other kinds of things. So if we think about when does the predictive capability of the mind activate, it is to protect us from problems. So depending on what's happened to you in the past, your anxiety will manifest in different ways. Okay? So this is why people are anxious about different things. So the more that you talk to people with anxiety, the more you discover that their anxiety traces back to particular events. And that's a learned behavior, because if you think about, if I'm worried about getting burned by a stove, why am I worried about getting burned by a stove? It's because I've been burned by a stove before. And the more recent the injury, the more likely I am to be worried about it. If you are dating someone who breaks up with you and then 2 months later wants to get back together, your anxiety is going to be what if they break up with me again? That comes from some injury that you've experienced. And that's the way that our brain works. Our brain, anytime we suffer or we take damage of some kind, our brain tries to learn from it and protect us. And the way that our brain tries to protect us is through anxiety, right? So it predicts problems. So this is kind of interesting, because if we kind of look at this is not necessarily, sure, it causes us suffering, and we'll kind of get to that for a second, in a second, but I want you guys to first realize that your anxiety is a part of your mind that is actually it's not something you need to get rid of. It's something that you need to tame. It's kind of like a horse that's gone out of control and is bucking around, and you need to calm it down and help it do what it's supposed to do, which is activate when you want it to activate. Okay? So let's just think a little bit about what anxiety looks like. What does anxiety look like? Okay. So anxiety usually manifests as thoughts about the future. And then anxiety also has a focus on the self. So what does that mean? So if you think about if you write down, and I encourage you guys to do this. So task number 2 is write down 10 anxious thoughts. And we're actually going to switch gears for a second. So this is what I want you guys to do. Is anxiety something you can really switch on and off? We're going to see, right? Very good. So we're going to get to the physical sensations in a second. So I want you guys, can someone just post an example of in chat, someone just give me an example of an anxious thought. Can I get an example? I don't know how much of a lag there is. No one likes me. Oh, perfect. What if I can't get a girlfriend? Beautiful. Okay. What if I can't get a girlfriend? Okay. Okay. Okay, will I be good enough that's good, guys. Thank you very much. Will I be good enough to pass the test? Right? So I want you guys to notice a couple of things. The first is this. You can't have anxiety without I or me. Actually, I mean, you can be anxious about other people, but generally speaking, a lot of the anxiety that we experience is focused on the self. The second thing is that, like, what is the tense? I mean, yeah, what is the direction of these thoughts, right? So like, will, what if? So these are future oriented. And these are focused on the self, right? You guys see that? And this stuff can change. This stuff is actually kind of irrelevant. This is the important thing. So if we're talking about how anxiety works, like what is the nature of anxiety? Like how does it function in your mind? If we're opening up the hood, this is the consistent part, because this can be like completely random, right? Will I ... what if ... And this stuff has to do with, like, you know, specifically what your anxieties are about. And I want you guys to write down 10 anxious thoughts and just see like what about this pattern applies and what doesn't. So throughout your day, if you have an anxious thought, just make a note of it and write it out. And I want you guys to understand that you can't say something like, some people so some people like are using words, right? So they're saying getting replaced. Getting replaced is not an anxious thought. So you guys have to capture the full thought, right? So Noah says getting replaced. So what I want you guys to think about, that's not actually the thought that you have in your head. So train yourself, because what the real thought is, what if I get replaced? That's the full thought. And part of this process of understanding and overcoming anxiety is to be clear and descriptive about what is going on in your mind. So as you can, try to really capture the fullness of the thought, okay? So the next thing to think about anxiety, so the first thing is there are thoughts, right? So there are thoughts of anxiety, and then there are also feelings. See, Dr. K learned something. They're also feelings. So the feelings are like pain in your chest, nausea, butterflies, headache, sweaty palms, shortness of breath, right? Here are examples of physical sensations that come with anxiety. So the first thing to understand is that anxiety has cognitive and physical manifestations. So these are fundamentally different, right? And you guys have to understand that, like notice both of these things. And sometimes you have an anxious thought without the sensations, and sometimes you have the sensations without a thought. So we're going to get to how to deal with each of these, because the pathway is a little bit different. Okay. So now what do we do with this? So there are thoughts and there are physical sensations. So the other thing so now what we're going to talk about is, like, what is your mind? How do these thoughts that we have, how does anxiety affect our mind? So I know this is kind of a weird kind of question, right? Like we don't really think about, we think like, oh, I'm anxious, and that's sort of like, I want to stop being anxious. But let's try to figure out, like, that's not sufficient. If we really want to understand anxiety, we have to think a little bit about what is the implication or what is happening in our mind when I have an anxious thought. So how does anxiety affect our mind? So the first thing is that anxious thoughts are circular. Okay? So I want you guys to just think about that. So anxious thoughts lead to more thoughts, which lead to more thoughts, which lead to more thoughts. And then we kind of end up where we started. You guys agree? So this is called rumination. And this is actually a hijacking of something called like our problem solving thought process, right? So problem thinking, solution, and then so let's say anxiety, relaxation, right? And then actually decrease in thought. So I want you guys to look at these two things. Okay, so this is problem solving. Let me try to fix this, okay? And then let's move that up a little bit. Move that back over here, okay? So let's just think about that, right? This is rumination, and this is anxiety, and this is problem solving. So do you guys see the difference between the, do you guys see kind of the difference between like these two processes? So this one is productive, and both of them start from the same place. Like they start with anxiety, right? Like you're worried about something, but one is a productive problem solving process, and the other is kind of like a self-fueling process. So we can think about problem solving as thinking through things, right? You start at point A and you go to point Z. And then anxious thinking is you start at point A and then you end up at point A. So you never get anywhere. So what this means is that if we think about this, like anxiety is exhausting because it doesn't stop. And problem solving is relaxing because you kind of like think through things and then you feel good about yourself. So anxiety sort of exhausts. When we think about how does anxiety affect the mind, the first thing that it does is it's circular and it ends up exhausting the mind. And so if we think about how do people cope, so what are the coping mechanisms for anxiety? Right? So it's stuff that, what is the main coping mechanism of the anxiety is to shut off thoughts or mind. So good examples of this are sleep, gaming, drugs, right? They're things that essentially try to shut off our thoughts because this is not getting anywhere, right? It's not doing anything for us. So it's circular. And so generally speaking, the solution that we have to anxiety is to shut off or turn off the mind or shut off our thoughts. The problem is that what happens, so if we do this, what happens when the mind turns back on, right? This is the real problem. So let's say you start playing video games like you're worried, oh, am I going to fail out of class? Am I prepared for the test? That feeling is exhausting. You guys are thinking about that for a while. And then you're like, oh, I can't take this anymore. I'm exhausted. I don't feel good. You start to play a video game and then it's relief. It's sweet, sweet relief. And then after you play the video game, then, as you turn off the video game, like what happens? The anxious feelings come back. You're just back to square one. You're right back here because you're not actually solving any problems. Okay? So the second thing to understand is that, so if we think about this So this process, if we think about problem solving, leads to a decrease in thought. Anxiety leads to an increase in thought. So this is what I want you guys to kind of think a little bit about, okay? So what happens when we increase thought versus decrease thought? So this is our mind. And there are some things that we do that sort of increase our thoughts, and some things that we do that decrease our thoughts. Okay? So what this essentially means is that when we feed the mind, we increase thoughts. And when we essentially starve the mind, we decrease thoughts. And what do I mean by this? Like, it's kind of like, you know, when you have an anxious thought, that anxious thought starts to breed, right? It's like, oh my God, this person doesn't like me, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. So what that looks like is anxious thought, right? So let's say anxious thought number one, and then and then that leads to number two, which leads to number three. And then one thought leads to another, right? So what we're doing is we're actually creating more and more thoughts. The other thing that happens is, like, sometimes when people have anxiety, they try to argue. So this is mechanism number two. So you try to tell yourself against the thoughts. And this can be yourself or other people. Okay? And so as you argue against the thoughts, what happens? The thoughts just grow. It leads to thought number 4, number 5, and number 6. Right? So do you guys see how, like, trying to argue against the thoughts, if we look at the mechanism of mind, we see that arguing against your thoughts actually does not work, and in fact makes your anxiety worse, right? This is the same problem. It's all the same thing. So then the question becomes, what do we do about that, right? So, like, if we assume that thoughts kind of breed other thoughts, or we assume that conflict within the mind, so the other way to describe this is tension. Actually, that's not this, but that's, so this process here is tension. So this creates tension in the mind, right? When you try to argue against yourself, you get yourself riled up. And the more tension you create, the more active the mind becomes. So if we think about this, you know, how does the mind, how can I come up with the right word for this? What makes the mind grow, right? So we're talking about feeding. So tension makes the mind grow, number one, right? So this can also include, these are essentially synonyms, but conflict. What else makes the mind grow? Excitement. Things like fantasy. So I want you guys to think about a daydream, right? A daydream is one thought leading to another thought, leading to another thought, leading to another thought, and the mind loves this. And so if we think about the active mind, an active mind is not really relaxed. When you think about, like, fantasy, your mind isn't relaxed, right? It's like super excited, and it's like active, super, super active. When you're in tension, when you're in conflict, when you're in worry, your mind is not relaxed. And what does a relaxed mind mean? I posit to you guys that a relaxed mind has fewer thoughts. So if you think about, like, when is your mind relaxed? Okay. So when does this happen? So the first thing is that if we do this, right, if we find a solution, that leads to relaxation. Then you don't have to worry about it anymore. The amount of thoughts once you come up with a good solution, and by a good solution, I don't mean a fictional or fantasy solution. I mean an actual solution that calms you down. It leads to a decrease in thought. So when does this happen? Solution. Number 2, sunset. Number 3, shavasana. Okay, that's that last pose that we did after the yoga. Like, how active was your mind? Number 4, meditation. Number 5, eating a cookie with full awareness. Right? So let me ask you guys something. What time frame are these things focused in? Where are you? Are you in the past, the present, or the future? Cookie cleanse, absolutely. Present. Right? So I want you guys to think about this. Just think about this for a second, okay? If anxiety is literally, like, the definition of anxiety is to have thoughts in the future, can anxiety exist if your mind is in the present? We're thinking about cognitive anxiety, okay? Literally, can anxiety exist if we're focused in the present? Does shower thoughts count as a relaxed mind? Absolutely, Asri. Can't I add gaming to the list? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want you guys to think about this, right? So now we're going to let's talk about gaming. This sounds crazy. So when are games fun and when are games less fun? So when you're fully engaged, so I started playing this game called Deep Rock Galactic, which I think is amazing. So like yesterday, there's this thing where you have a timer and like a timer counts down. You have to like get on a ship before the timer runs out. And like we were playing this game and like yesterday, the timer was ticking down and we had like 6 seconds left and we weren't sure if we were going to make it. And in that moment, my mind was thinking about nothing except this moment. And it was like, I started cheering. It was 11:30 at night. I started cheering after we made it because one of us made it. And so the mission was successful. And my wife was like, you're being really loud. So there are times when gaming makes us live, as crazy as it sounds, in the present. And I want you all to understand this. If gaming did not do this, this would not work. Right? So if we think about sleep, drugs, gaming, they're able to bring us to something like the present. When is gaming less fun? When we're thinking about the future in the game. If I'm playing a game of League of Legends or Dota and I have someone who's feeding, why is that not fun? It's because I'm thinking about the next 5 minutes. I'm not thinking about now. I'm thinking about, oh God, their ADC or their carry is getting fed. We're going to lose. Or my so-and-so is a retard. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. I'm going to have to sit. Let's look at it. I'm going to have to sit in this game for 30 minutes. Okay, guys, let's look for where are the important words. Give you guys a little hint. Let's go back and examine our anxiety words. Wait, where did they go? Here we go, right? So what are the important words? Future-oriented and self. Do we see those here? Future-oriented and self. To this crap doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. This is unhappiness of the mind. So in gaming, it's actually a beautiful example. Because actually, if you think about, if you think about like meeting the deadline in Deep Rock Galactic, if you don't think you're going to make it, then that is actually anxiety provoking. But there are times when you're playing a video game where your mind is fully focused in the present. You're not actually worried about making it. You're trying to make it. So I want you guys to notice this difference. Worrying about winning and trying to win. What's the difference here? Where are we with this one? What's the time? Where are we when we're worrying about winning? What do you guys think? So let's do another poll. Oh, sorry. Cancel. What time frame are you in when you are worrying about winning? Past, present. Okay. You guys tell me. Right? Beautiful. So let's do another one. Okay. Oh, looks like I can't do another one yet. Oh, I can't. How do I show poll results? Okay, so it's like 95% to 4%. Where is the time frame of your mind when you are trying to win? Past, present. You guys can't see the poll? Interesting. I'm gonna have to learn how to do that. Oh, display results at the end of the poll. I see. Okay. Got it. Fixed. Fixed. Saved. See, look at that. Just think about that for a second. When you're trying to win a game, it's a lot of fun. When you're worried about losing, it sucks. Even when you know when you know you've won, how fun is that game? That's the next question, right? So let's ask that one. So, okay. So now we're going to do one more. Okay. What's more fun? Trying to win a game or knowing that you've basically won? Trying to win, knowing you've won. Let's see this one. Okay. See if there's some amount. What do you guys think is more fun? Now, interesting, huh? Now, I think the interesting thing about knowing you've won is that a lot of times our games have certain outcomes that we want, right? Like we're grinding towards something. And even if you're grinding towards something, that grinding can be somewhat present focused, which is like, it's kind of weird. And you really have to look at that because in that moment, the grind is like what you're doing. And that's why you want to win because you want the outcome. But even in that moment, you're kind of present within the frame of grinding, which is complicated, but right. So there is a little bit, there's a little bit more, grinding is in the present, right? Grinding, ing. So now let's try to kind of wrap things up and see what we've learned. Okay. So we haven't really gotten a chance to talk about physical anxiety. That's the first thing. But hopefully I've convinced you guys that anxiety, first of all, so let's go through conclusions. Okay. Number one, anxiety is a normal part of the mind gone. Actually, let's just go with this. I like this. Gone wild. Okay. Number one. Number two, anxiety has two components: a cognitive component and a physical component. Okay. So we haven't really talked much about physical anxiety today, which is okay. We'll get to that. Number three is that anxiety is future focused and oftentimes has rumination or unproductive thinking and grows with tension. Okay. So now my question to you guys is, what do we do about this, right? So let's think about the structure. Wow, my handwriting's bad. Okay. Dr. K is going to take a handwriting course. Structure of the anxious thought, which is I, me, right? Plus future plus specific content based on your past experience. So I want you guys to notice this for a second. A lot of times when psychiatrists or therapists try to help someone with their anxiety, what they actually focus on is this, right? Oh, tell me about why you're worried about social anxiety. Like, just think about this for a second. We have social anxiety as a different diagnosis from, let's say, a phobia or a different kind of anxiety, health anxiety, social anxiety. Western medicine focuses on different kinds of content and classifies these anxieties differently. Right? Do you guys see that? This is where Western psychiatry or Western medicine is focused. What I want you guys to focus on, what the yogis focus on, is these two. They focus on these. Because the cool thing is that you can fix someone's social anxiety, and then they'll still have health anxiety, or they'll still have imposter syndrome, or any number of other things, a phobia. Phobias are a little bit different, to be honest, but that's actually not a good example. So the nature of a phobia and the content of a phobia is actually different from anxiety. Uh-oh. Okay, so imposter syndrome. So like, even if we check this off the list, that we still have to do these, right? This is what Western medicine does. So now I'm going to ask you guys, what is the solution to this? How do we fix this? One, bring mind to present. Okay. Second is don't feed the mind. So what that means is don't argue. Don't even go for reassurance. No argument, no reassurance. Because our mind rebels against that, right? So we want to avoid these. And we'll talk a little bit practically about how to do that in the future. The second thing, so I want you guys to see this for a second. So one is to bring the mind to the present. So if you do something like yoga or you do some centering activity, like this is how meditation helps anxiety. Because meditation brings your mind to the present. That's what meditation is. And therefore you can't be anxious. Number two, this is the next thing, is to decrease the ego. This is the real answer to anxiety. I want you guys to think about this. So this is the self, right? So do you guys get anxious about things that are like how much of your anxiety has to do with you? If you can remove you from the equation, then how powerful is your anxiety? I'll give you guys an example. So let's say that I go to class and I start to say something, and then I'm afraid that these people are going to think that I'm an idiot. And let's say that you're in a room of random strangers who you're never going to see again. Are you less likely to speak with the strangers or more likely to speak with the strangers? Right? So if you can remove your sense of self from the equation, if you don't have to worry about your ego and what people are going to think about you, then your anxiety goes down. Right? Okay, so let's think about this. Okay, if you guys want to poll it, that's fine. Let's poll it. Let's do this, okay? Are you more worried about looking stupid in front of people you're going to see again or people who you will never see again? Fine. Poll it. Let's see. No. Gotta hit another button. Ah. Excellent question to poll. See, so this gets tricky. We can explore it further. Right? So or do you feel more comfortable when you're, so here's the other way to put it. Like, so to think about the ego is, do you feel more comfortable when you're anonymous? Right? Why do people with social anxiety function better on the internet and behind computer screens and away from other people? It's because they can protect that, they can isolate their ego or sense of self. This is why anonymity is protective. So the other thing that you can do is so one way is anonymity is a way to like cover the self, but the other thing that you can do is you can sort of start to dissolve the ego, right? And the way that you dissolve the ego, this is when we talk about meditation. We're gonna have a whole day on ego, or more than one day. You can do a whole semester on ego if you want to. But basically, like, I want you guys to think about someone who's confident is someone who is less likely to be influenced by the opinion of others. And so their ego goes down. And as their ego goes down, they're less anxious because the opinions of other people don't kind of matter to them. So in terms of what to do about it, this is the first thing that I want you guys to focus on, is if you can bring your mind to the present, literally anxiety cannot exist. Physical anxiety is different. I'm talking about cognitive anxiety. So if your mind is in the present, you cannot be anxious. That is like a fact. And I encourage you guys, so in my opinion, it's not a fact, it's my opinion. And I encourage you guys to test that and see for yourself whether you can be anxious while you are in the present. And if you are in the present, because we think about it this way, right? So remember that being in the present is what we kind of call, like, all this stuff is relaxing. You guys see that? Anything that is present is going to be relaxing. And can you be anxious while you're relaxed? It's kind of like an oxymoron. So I encourage you guys to examine this. And let's even think about eating a cookie. Like, so if I eat a cookie and I can just sit and enjoy the cookie, then it's fine. If I eat a cookie and I'm worried about gaining weight and that this is going to make me look fat, then it's not fun. Take whatever example you want to. Look at yourselves. Examine yourself. See what you discover. We're going to do questions. Okay, so let's start with, I don't know how to specify people, but we're going to actually start with questions about, how are we going to do? Okay, let's do questions. Let's do, so, okay, so Raymond, we're going to start with you, buddy. Let's see if this works. I've clicked a checkbox. Okay, so one of the pieces of feedback that we got is that we want one question at a time. All right, Raymond. Talk to me, buddy. Hello? Okay. All right. I'm going to Felipe, Rico, and Juan teed you guys up for questions. Because I don't hear Raymond. Ah. Okay. Oh, I see. So I see that there's a button for audio. Got it.
Hello?
Hey, Raymond. Oh, I can't hear Raymond. I can't hear you, buddy.
Raymond, you have to turn the microphone button on the top.
Somebody's speaking. It's not. You. All right. All right. Who's speaking? Do you have a question?
Me, yeah. Hello.
Hey,
Hello?
Felipe. What's
Yeah,
your?
hi. So when we were talking before, sorry, I have stuff written down. You talked about the first two parts about that. Sorry, my webcam messed up. We were talking about the I will, and then we were talking about the part where we're thinking about in the future.
Mhm.
And you said that we didn't want to seek reassurance about our thoughts because we'd be fighting against that and create more thoughts. But how do I fix my assumption about, like, for example, when we were talking about all of this, I was thinking about a situation about me thinking that my roommate doesn't like me as much as the other roommates. And if I don't get reassurance that my roommate likes me as much, which I think is probably true, I'm just being very anxious about it. How do I fix the anxiety if I don't get reassurance about it?
So let me ask you something. When you get reassurance about it, what does it do to your anxiety?
Oh my God, my webcam's messing up. But when I get reassurance about it, logically, it would help my anxiety because if she says that,
That's
like,
not what I'm asking you. I'm
okay,
asking you, what does it do to your anxiety?
what it does to my anxiety is it probably creates more thoughts.
No, I'm asking you. So
Okay,
you're concerned that your roommate
yeah,
doesn't like you. So
yeah.
have you sought reassurance about this in the past?
No, this is just a thing that came up today, so that's why I was relating about it when I was
Okay.
listening to the
Have
rest of
you
the
been
talk.
anxious about something before?
Yes,
And when someone reassures you, what does that?
reasons why they maybe be telling me this to make me feel better, and
Yep.
it becomes a big thought loop.
Yep.
But I guess it depends on the situation as well. I don't think that's a universal thing across anxiety.
So give me an example of where reassurance helps you.
Like in this roommate case, I feel like that would help me
Not one
because,
that could happen,
okay,
one that has happened.
um, maybe me going to a lecturer or talking about a grade and saying I'm anxious about this exam because I don't think I'm prepared enough, and I talk to the lecturer, and the lecturer then explains to me about how, according to him, I have been prepared, and then talks me through all of that, and that maybe helps me.
Has that helped you in the past?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that that is different because so I know this sounds crazy, but when we say reassurance, I want you to understand that reassurance is not what the outside world gives you, because in both cases, you're saying that someone from the outside tries to reassure you, right?
Yeah.
Someone
Yeah.
says, okay, you're going to do fine on the test. And someone else says, okay, you're actually a really smart person. Even though the signals from the outside are exactly the same, in one case, it fuels your anxiety, and in another case, it doesn't fuel your anxiety.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So the first thing that we need to understand is that that has nothing to do with the outside, because if the outside is giving us the same thing and our response is differential,
Ooh, that makes
that's
sense.
not coming from the outside, it's coming from here.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right? So then
Yeah.
the question is, what is different in here? And I think in some cases, what's different is the way that your mind responds.
Okay, this makes sense because it can be like your confidence that is different as well. Because if I'm not confident, like if inside maybe I do think I'm smart and I do think I do well in a test, and I am more confident about that, then when I hear the reassurance, it will help me confirm maybe my own thoughts that I was like confirm my confidence. But then when other situations, maybe if I'm internally not confident and my ego is going to be damaged, maybe if a girl doesn't like me or something, then it will it won't actually help because my ego will be fighting against it.
So I think that that's possible. So what I would encourage you to do, Felipe, is to examine this. The main thing, so remember, we're not talking about, we're talking about individual situations as examples to understand principles, right?
Okay.
What we're talking about today is not solving for the equation of a particular line. We're trying to figure out y equals mx plus b. We're trying to figure out what are the variables. And I'm telling you that if two people in separate situations give you reassurance, and in one that helps your anxiety, and in another it doesn't help your anxiety, it doesn't have anything to do with the outside. It has to do with the inside.
Okay.
The next thing is I want you to think about, remember that there are two problem solving routes, right? One is anxiety. What's the other one? I sort of said it, but do you remember the two diagrams?
Well, one's the problem solving. So it goes from you have the problem, then you have a solution, and then there's the anxiety thought loop.
Right. So the question is, when you sit down with a professor, which mode of operation does your mind move into?
Okay, I'm going to the problem solving.
So you have to tell me. Don't hypothesize. Don't give me logic. Go and study it. Because I think what your professor does is walks you through the problem solving loop, which then relaxes the mind.
Okay.
Great question.
Okay, no worries. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, let's see if we've got Raymond. I'm going to give you the boot, okay, Felipe?
Yeah, no worries. Bye.
Raymond? Nope. Juan? Nope. Sorry, buddy. Okay, we're going to invite a couple more people. I know you guys say one person at a time, but because of these technical difficulties.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Who is that?
This is Juan.
Okay, I'm going to invite Reese, someone else, and Victor. Just while we've got Juan on the question. Go ahead, Juan.
Okay, so my question's kind of big, kind of philosophical, but I feel like this affects my anxiety, my motivation, pretty much everything about myself. How do I deal with pessimism and challenging big world views? Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Like biological determinism, being afraid that I'm incapable of change.
Okay, so once again, I'm not going to answer the content of your question because, like you said, that's a big question.
Yeah.
And instead, what I'm going to do is we're going to look at the mechanism of your question.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start by, hold on a second. Okay, let's try to examine your thoughts. So tell me a little bit more about what is that? I don't understand what you mean.
What don't you understand?
You say, I have, this philosophical something or other. Can you say that again? I don't know what that means. So what do you mean by pessimism?
That I am incapable of change. I'm incapable of overcoming my anxiety.
I am incapable of change. Right? So let's think about, what is the tense of your statement? Past. Is this incorrect?
Oh, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose I'm incapable of change in the future.
Exactly, right? So now we have to be tricky. We have to be careful because the mind is tricky. And just because you're using a verb in the present tense does not mean that this is in the present tense, right? Are you sitting there and you're saying, I'm incapable of change? That's not what you're saying. I think what this really is I'm afraid I'm never going to change.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that the word?
That's correct.
Because here's the thing. I know this is going to sound, crazy, but so sometimes I work with patients with cancer. Really fascinating, in terms of understanding the mind. So I'm going to die. How do you think this person feels when a terminal cancer patient understands that they're going to die, how do you think they feel?
Well, I guess it depends on how they feel about death, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they could be accepting, they could be scared.
Sure. I know this is going to sound crazy, but what is the tense of this statement?
Future?
Incorrect.
Damn it.
I know it sounds bizarre, but it's not. It's because this looks like a future statement, right? So I guess I need to explain a little bit. So sometimes I talk to a cancer patient who recognizes and accepts that death is inevitable for them. And bizarrely, when they recognize that truth, that is a truth that comes from the present. It's not actually like a fear of the future. It's not even in the future. It's like an acceptance in the now that death is inevitable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And bizarrely, this leads to peace. It's bizarre. It's the weirdest thing. But when someone accepts in the present that some action is inevitable, they actually like relax because it's that boat has sailed. You can lament it, you can grieve. So they're going to grieve. They're going to be sad. They're going to be filled with lament, maybe some amount of regret, but underneath it all, there's still peace. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's sort of a random aside. I don't know exactly. I mean, hopefully that was helpful for people. I felt like that was significant. I'm not exactly sure why. So let's go back to this. Okay. So now you tell me, and is it Juan?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So Juan, so when you say like, what do we do about this? You tell me like, what are our solutions? Right. So like you say like, I'm never going to change. You also said some other stuff about the planet, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I believe that everything in the universe is biologically determined.
Okay. Biological determinism. Fine. What else? What other kind of pessimistic thoughts do you have?
I mean, I think it all really stems from there.
Okay, sure. So, for the purpose of this seminar, what we're going to do is we're going to take this, and we don't actually care about that. We don't care about that either. What are you going to do?
Okie dokie.
So what do you do?
About fear?
Sure. In general, like how should you approach this problem? Right? Because you get that if I start talking to you about biological determinism, this is going to be intellectual masturbation for an hour and you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because you've done it before. Does that make sense?
Right. Doing that hasn't helped me, obviously.
Exactly. So that's not where your answer lies. And this is bizarre because, like I said, in psychiatry, we focus on the content of the mind. And in general, we think that solutions are external and like content based. Like, I don't know how else to say that. Like, it's kind of a weird statement. I don't even know how many people are going to understand it. But like, we think that the solution to, climate change is in the outside world, which obviously it is. But also like anxiety about climate change can somewhat come from the outside world. But also like, I want you to think about this. If you're worried about climate change, you can act like I can go outside and plant a tree every day, but that person is not living in the future. That person is living in the present. They're addressing the problem of climate change, even though they don't know if it's going to work. They don't know if it's enough or the corporations will screw them or whatever. They're going out every day and they're planting a tree. They're doing their part. There's immense peace in that. And there's immense problem solving in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. What am I doing now?
Exactly. So that is what I'm saying is that irrespective of what the problem is, it's not that a particular solution, because someone can be worried about climate change and they can be worried about corporate pollutions, or they can be worried about cruise ships or, insufficient like carbon, like moving to renewable energy, or like, hitting a tipping point of greenhouse gases, or like, sea levels rising, or like all kinds of stuff. You can be focused on all that crap. All that crap can be anxiety provoking. You can also get data that's reassuring, and those people's anxieties will still remain. Do you see that? Like, it's just like what Felipe was saying about the external world can give you reassurance, and you can just say, screw that reassurance, I'm not interested. Right. So I'm asking you, where does your solution lie?
Yeah, dealing with that fear, dealing with that anxiety.
That fear is wrong. Right? That fear is this. Do you understand that? That fear is a
Right.
specific fear. It's actually incorrect. Sorry to say so. I'm being a little bit blunt with you, by the way.
Sure.
Right? So where's our solution been? What have we been focusing on? What words?
Being in the present.
Yes, right? So in the present. So when you worry about biological determinism, what are you worried about? Like, is determinism is about the past, present, or future?
The future.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is I, right? You feel like I'm incapable. So I think what you need to work on is I and being in the present. Because determinism is like, I'm going to be screwed down the road. Like, there's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
Fine. So then what are you going to do today? Like, forget about the future. What are you going to do today? Juan?
Try to make changes.
What are you going to change today?
What I think about, where I'm thinking in the present or in the
How
future.
do you do that? I'm asking you literally, what are you going to do today? So what part of the world are you in?
I'm in Washington.
Okay. So you're in Washington. So it's like what? Like 8:30 in the morning for you?
Yep.
So what are you going to do after the webinar ends?
I was thinking about meditating.
Okay. And after meditation, what are you going to do?
I was going to write a to-do list.
Okay. And then after that, what are you going to do?
Maybe do a little studying.
Are you going to study or not study?
I'm going to study.
Okay. So what about biological determinism? What does biological determinism have to do about anything that you just said?
Well, I think it has everything to do with it.
Why?
I mean, because there are certain factors in my life based on past experiences that bring me to carry out these actions.
I disagree. So you're telling me that you're going to meditate. Like,
yeah.
I don't see how biological determinism has anything to do with meditation. I don't see how biological determinism has anything to do with writing a task list. And I don't see how biological determinism has anything to do with actually sitting down and cracking a textbook. In a sense, obviously it does, because when you study, you're going to have a particular IQ, and depending on your IQ and depending on XYZ and depending on ABC, the results of your studying will be different. And if you want to say that biological determinism has something to do with the results of your actions, by all means. Yeah. If I say that I'm going to jump, if I'm going to stand up and jump up and down after I'm done with this webinar, biological determinism determines how high I jump, but it has nothing to do with whether I jump or whether I don't jump. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but I feel differently.
I understand that. So you need to start trying it this way and see what happens, because I don't think that biological determinism has anything to do with making a to-do list. That just feels so far-fetched to me. Okay, let's do this. Okay. Let's see. So we're going to do a poll. Does biological determinism have anything to do with making a to-do list?
I know it's ridiculous. I know it's ridiculous.
Let's find out. Now, I think the real question here is how hard